Today's story is going to be about a member of the paedophile group called PI, which stands for the Paedophile Information Exchange. And this is the story of member number 51, Peter Righton. So, during the 1970s and 80s in the UK, there was a paedophile ring operating at the highest level in this country. Paedophiles during this time were trying to get the age of consent lowered to 4. The Paedophile Information Exchange campaigned for the legislation of sex between adults and children. What's even more disturbing is that prominent MPs, members of Parliament, who are still active today, actually backed this. The members of PI don't feel it's fair that they are discriminated against. This is the story of member number 51, Peter Righton. So Peter was born Paul Pelham Righton on the 14th of April 1926, and he died on the 12th of October 2007. Peter was an academic, a teacher and an advisor on the residential care of children in England. Behind the mask of respectability was a monster, an abuser of children. He was only caught due to him buying child porn from Holland, which was found by a customs agent. On the 2nd of April 1992, a package was found containing naked images of boys. On the 28th of April 1992, another package was found addressed to Peter Righton. At the time, Peter was employed on 2 projects which aimed to improve the lives of children in care. A month after the images were found at customs, police raided his house where they found even more images of kids. He was charged with possessing and importing child porn. He was only fined £900, and he admitted that the material was for his own personal gratification. He was charged with a £75 importing fee. Barbara Khan, chair of the National Children's Bureau, claims that Peter told her he was a member of a book club in Holland, and they contacted him to say he still had money on his account. Did he want them to send material over for them? Peter said yes, and that was how he was caught. He claimed they were just harmless photos. Another lie paedophiles tell themselves. Peter graduated from Oxford, a very prestigious university in England. He had served in the war. He had been a probation officer, and he had wanted to become a Church of England chaplain. We can all guess why. In 1957, he became an English teacher at a boys' boarding school in Kent. His bedroom was in the attic near the boys' dormitories. The school was called Red Hill, and it had a reputation for helping bright boys with behaviour difficulties. Peter was well established as a teacher, and he was surrounded by the most vulnerable children, the most withdrawn and needy. The boys in his circle would often spend time in his bedroom. One victim says there was goodies on offer in his room: cigarettes, alcohol and sweets. He was offered to take him out in his car for little days out. Peter was like a father figure, a good listener and a friend. This was all part of the grooming process. He would take this boy swimming and buy him ice cream. Sadly, Peter started to masturbate in front of him from the age of 12. He would use children to bring other children into his sick, depraved circle. Peter kept a diary, and one entry said, quote, "Legally, I haven't a leg to stand on. It's an official crime for a man of 37 to make love to a boy of 15, end quote." Another lie these sick bastards say. Some boys had reported the abuse from other teachers, and police conducted an inquiry, but it was dropped due to a lack of evidence. The head had asked Peter to leave, but he hadn't told other schools why, so Peter was free to go on and continue the abuse of kids. Peter's diary contained more than 100 names of boys who he had sexual contact with at places he had worked and lived. At Keele University, Peter went on to make a name for himself, training social workers. His friend, Bishop John Neal, had spoken with one of Peter's victims, so he knew full well what he was up to. But as we now know, Neal was also a paedophile. In 1968, Peter became senior lecturer at the National Institute for Social Work. Experts there shaped national policy on childcare. In 1971, he became part of a children's charity called the National Children's Bureau. He set up a unit which worked directly with children. Peter came out as a homosexual, a guise many paedophiles use. Peter used his professional reputation to gain access to kids and to allow others in a circle to access them. Paedophiles can be respectful, smart, charming, good with kids, and the least likely you would ever suspect. The stereotype of the dirty old man needs to be smashed because it's putting kids at risk. We also need to come to terms with the fact that boys are equally at risk of being molested and raped. Official statistics show girls are more at risk, but victim impact statements tell a different story. More boys are sexually molested by paedophiles, but they are less likely to report it, and if they do report it, it's less likely to be responded to in the same way. If a boy is molested and gets an erection, this confirms for the paedophile that there was no harm done and that the boy enjoyed it. The boys will feel confused and conflicted, even though we know that things of that nature are out of the control of the human body. This can keep the boy silent because he feels responsible for what the monster's done to him, and especially if they've had an orgasm. But it's not their fault. Peter's charmed circle consisted of boys who struggled to fit in, which also fits with what we know about many victims. The paedophile can spot what child to target. It's a well-owned skill to them. When a reporter asked one of his victims why he kept going back to be abused in Peter's room, which I think is victim blaming, the victim replied, quote, "It was like he had a magnetic hold over you," end quote, which is part of the process of grooming. One victim from Redhill struggles to this day, as I'm sure many do. He finds it hard to function and build trusting relationships. Proof that the damage done to these kids lasts a lifetime. Children who are abused in this way feel dirty, defiled, used, broken. Paedophiles are seducers of children. They will abuse until they are stopped, which makes the response from the criminal justice system even more baffling. Many receive a slap on the wrist or a suspended sentence. And those who do receive a prison sentence resume that behaviour once they're released. In prison, they're often model prisoners. They keep their heads down, they don't cause any problems for the staff, so are often released early for good behaviour. They are master manipulators and very calculating. Peter came out as a homosexual in the 1970s in the hopes that he would not be discovered as a paedophile and a hebephile. Attitudes at this time were that children were capable of being sexual. Around this time, Peter started to live with a man who he had once sexually abused as a child, known only as Richard. He too took a sexual interest in boys, and together they would travel to the Mediterranean to abuse little boys. Each introduced the other to boys they knew. Around this same time in 1973, Peter was asked to give a guest lecture at Bernardo's, the children's charity. Other opportunities of trust came his way. He was appointed governor of a school for children with special needs. This gave him access to children who were even more vulnerable. Richard was also a teacher at this same school. Another member of the staff was a single mother who had a little boy, and Richard took a real interest in him. This boy claimed that Richard was a good listener and gave him lots of attention, and that he cared about what he was interested in, that he was a good guy. Again, this is all part of the grooming process. Richard took the boys swimming, and it was here that he molested this boy. Following the first time, the boys blamed himself and wondered why Richard had done that to him. He was only 12. The boy blamed himself for being too friendly and too nice. Richard kept a diary and kept Peter informed about the boys he had abused. This boy never reported Richard, but a few months later he was arrested for touching a boy in a cinema in Scotland. Even though Peter knew about Richard's offence and arrest, he still provided him with a glowing reference which recommended Richard for the job to work with children. Well, of course he did. Peter was also close friends with another paedophile, Charles Scott Napier. They were both members of Pi. Napier was the treasurer. Following a conviction for assault on 5 of his pupils, Napier was banned from teaching in English schools, so in 1978 he got a job teaching English in Sweden. Here he was teaching boys as young as 11, and just like Richard, he too kept Peter informed of all of the offences against children. In one letter he wrote, quote, "I've said goodbye to 2 classes that have had some heart-stopping beautiful boys. I've trained them to greet me in the street, and I always put my address on the board and invite visits," end quote. Like Richard, Napier used the swimming pool to touch boys. Napier would film himself grooming the boys with alcohol and getting the boys to take the tops off and dance. The videos are sick to watch, but they show that Peter visited Napier in Sweden to also abuse these boys. Now, these videos are on YouTube in a documentary. They are a bit disturbing to watch, but it's also one of them, you need to see it to believe it. 2 years later, Napier applied to be able to teach in England again, backed by yet another glowing reference from Peter. Peter wrote that Napier, quote, "no longer constitutes a sexual risk to children in his charge," end quote. Peter's professional reputation was going from strength to strength, and in the early 1980s he helped to draft the Barclay Report, which defined the jobs of social workers for a decade. At the Open University, he devised a course for social workers on caring for children. Even following the arrest of Peter, his course remained on the syllabus, as well as being involved in the text, Perspectives on Paedophilia, edited by Brian Taylor. In Peter's chapter, he claims to have counselled 68 paedophiles and 14 boys who have had affairs with paedophiles. He claims that far from being harmed, boys can benefit from sex with men, and in fact, often initiate it, another common lie paedophiles like to say. He claimed that children do not need protection from sex with adults. In this text, another chapter is written by another paedophile, Maurice Fraser, who was a child psychiatrist. In his spare time, he dedicated his time to charities which took children away on sailing trips. In 1988 in Cornwall, he helped set up the Azimuth Trust, which in 3 years had taken more than 100 kids away. Many of these kids had learning difficulties, and one of his victims said he really liked Fraser and that he was like one of the boys. The Trust had its own magazine, and Fraser was editor, which released pictures of naked boys on boats playing. One boy was paid £5 to take nude pictures. Behind the Azimuth Trust lay an even more sinister link between boys in the Trust and another paedophile ring. On Napier's return from Sweden, he had bought a house on an island on the Thames River. In the 1980s, his home became a meeting place for paedophiles. One of these men was Peter Righton. One victim claims that from the age of 12, he and other boys were frequent visitors. Napier would offer the children money in exchange for sex. Another member of Pi was David Bloomfield, and is often seen in the videos Charles Napier filmed. Bloomfield was CEO of the Standing Conference on Schools, Science and Technology. He gave up the job in 1993 after being convicted of having child pornography. The boys who would visit Napier's home would also visit Peter's too. Peter would tell the boys that sex between adults and children was something natural, and he would tell them that you can't knock it until you've tried it. In 1987, Peter was working at a school alongside Richard again. It was a boarding school for disturbed children. The school's policy discouraged parental visits. It was only when one boy had gone home at the end of term that his mother realised that something bad had happened. He said that Richard would go into the boy's room at night and masturbated in front of him. This boy was only 10. The mother believes more than this happened because Richard would take the boy to Peter's house. No prosecution happened, even though many victims tried to raise the alarm. The abuse was well documented on video, journals and letters, and also through the child porn which was made. The child pornography made was very explicit, showing anal rapes, oral sex and other depraved things. At one point, 2 girls around the age of 8 or 9 were shown. One little boy finally told his father that I had been getting abused for 12 months. He was 8. The little boy picked out a picture of Richard to the police. He felt guilty and blamed himself. This is an 8-year-old little boy. These fucking bastards. In 1991, Peter was involved in a project to improve the lives of children in residential homes, informally called the Charter of Children. He was paid £200 a day to carry out this research. He would visit children's homes and boarding schools. In 1992, Peter faced charges for possessing child porn, but he still tried to tell colleagues that it wasn't a big deal. Peter was sacked from the charter and he was jailed. People who had worked with him state that he kept his professional life and secret life separate. He was a con man and a manipulator. But children had raised the issue time after time, and nothing came of it. Despite 3 convictions, Maurice Fraser still had not been struck off the General Medical Council. They were happy for him to leave quietly. Napier was working in Cairo and had written to friends that Cairo was full of boys. He was also suspended. Peter continued to live with Richard. He had betrayed his position of trust to abuse some of the most vulnerable, lonely children, the ultimate abuse of power. His victims still feel the shame and guilt and continue to battle the damage he caused. Tom Watson, MP, contacted the Chief Constable of Suffolk and warned that Peter was living on the estate of Lord Henniker, where children from Islington were taken to be abused, but he was ignored. Peter died 12th October 2007, and in October 2012, Tom Watson MP claimed that Peter was involved in a paedophile ring which led all the way to the British establishment. A former police detective, Terry Shutt, made a similar claim in 2014. Operation Kayakos was launched into historical claims of child sex abuse, which was a spin-off to Operation Fairbank, which was involved in investigating the Elm Guesthouse scandal. Thank you for listening. I know it's been a hard one, but it's important. It's important to know that the British government has been complicit in child sex abuse for decades. I have no doubt it's still going on today. Can I prove that? No. Anyway, whatever you're doing today, have a good day. Stay safe and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.